So we'll move on to the next speaker for the day. The next speaker is Mr. Peter Sprick. His title is Effective Blue Team Strategies, Building a Defensible Environment. Peter is an experienced CISO and a global cybersecurity director with strategic vision, cross-disciplinary expertise, and proven track record, leading the global organization through change, building, transforming, and managing the enterprise security with the executive level stakeholders. Key areas of interest are integrated threat intelligence, incident response, and vulnerability management into the unified threat management, cybersecurity architecture and operations building, an efficient, learn, and effective global security program. With this interest and pleasure to invite, and it's an honor to have Peter here. Peter, would you share your screen?
Hello, everyone.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. So let me share the screen then.
You share your screen? Are you able to share your screen?
Hi, Peter, could you hear us?
Can you hear us? Peter, can you hear us?
He's apparently seems to have left the call. We'll wait for a couple of minutes for him to rejoin.
Okay, so something happened, so we're waiting for him to rejoin. So just be patient. So let's see if we can able to open this presentation.
Yeah.
Peter, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear us? Peter, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I just had to restart the Zoom to allow the screen share.
Something happened, huh? I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So
let's try it again. And let me please know if you see my screen.
Yeah, we can see your screen, Peter.
Yeah. Perfect. So thanks everyone for inviting me. I'm really pleased to speak at this conference. And let's dive into the effective blue team strategies. We have 30 minutes. And what I want to share with you is more of a collection of tips and tricks that hopefully will not be all known to you, but I believe that at least some of these things might spark some interest and maybe challenge some thinking. I was already introduced, so thanks a lot for that. Generally, my journey into information security has been from hands-on internal functions to business leading functions to currently, again, internal function as the Chief Information Security Officer at SUSE. I want to start the lecture, the presentation, with the OODA loop. I would generally expect that by now you have at least heard about the OODA loop, or the Observe, Orient, Decide, Act cycle that comes from the military practice. It was coined by John Boyd, a military strategist. And in past few years, I have seen it taken off, most notably in relation to the threat intelligence into the cybersecurity. However, I also feel that a lot of times it's being used and misused in a wrong way. And the primary reason why I see that is that people generally see the cycle and tell to themselves, okay, I understand. I need to first observe the situation. I need to orient myself. I need to decide, and then I do the action, and it's a cycle. I should not be acting without having the information, but I also cannot stay in just collecting information all the time. I need to move on and act. And that's all good, but it's very, very shallow interpretation of the OODA loop. The key here is that OODA loop is relative. John Boyd was not just a military strategist, he was a fighter pilot. And the OODA loop is coming from his practice in aerial combat, where the general principle is be better than your opponent. And from this perspective, what I want you to take away, even if you leave now the lecture, always think about OODA loop as two OODA loops, then apply to cybersecurity. Because your adversary also has the OODA loop of their own, and whoever completes the cycle first and is able to get to another cycle of OODA loop in a more efficient way, is going to win the engagement, is going to win the combat, be it a real-time military engagement or cyber conflict between the attackers and defenders. So always think about this in form of competing OODA loops, where you are trying to finish yours before your opponent. And there are, in general, two ways how to do it. But let's first speak what I mean by the competing OODA loops. From the adversary perspective, your threat actor, when they start the attack, they have the initial advantage in operational tempo. Essentially, they are the ones who dictate when the conflict actually starts. And that's an advantage. They can choose the time Friday 5 p.m. or Monday 8 a.m. on the contrary. There is also the saying that the attacker has to be successful once, while the defenders have to be successful all the time. I think it's misunderstood. It's wrong, because also the defenders have to cut the adversary just once to foil his attack. But it's coming from the perspective of the tempo advantage of the adversary. And also the adversary is the one who decides what it is that they want to achieve, whether they want to ransomware you out, steal your data, deface your website. That's their objective they are pursuing from the beginning. While as a defender, as a first part of your OODA loop is you need to first understand what's going on. So the attackers are trying to rush through the OODA loop as fast as possible. And just some industry statistics to give you the grounding in reality, where we are. The average breakout time from the initial attempt of exploitation from the attacker to the attacker achieving their objectives and getting out in 2021 was 1.5 hours. So that's the clock against which the defenders must operate. So some attackers are even abusing it to the extent that they don't care if you detect them, because they rely on the fact that before you get your manager and your support on the phone, they will be out with your data. And that's an interesting shift in the approach from the years like decade ago, when the better attackers were those who were staying under the radar, sometimes for years. Now, a lot of the attacker tactics shifted to get in, get out as quickly as possible. Finish the OODA loop, finish the kill chain. If you are not familiar with the kill chain methodology, there is an excellent white paper from Lockheed Martin. I strongly recommend to read that, but it's out of scope for this session. On the defender side, however, they have one major advantage, and that's the home ground advantage. It's the time that you are able and that you should be investing in your defenses before the conflict starts with the adversary, that you can gain to your advantage. So you have the knowledge of the battlefield and you can prepare the battlefield. If you waste on these two opportunities, then yes, the attacker is always going to win. But these opportunities are the ways for you how to manipulate the OODA loop. Because one way, the simplistic one, if you look at this just a single OODA loop, is I need to run faster. But that's not going to cut it, because run faster from defender perspective, if you are just going against the clock of 1 hour and 32 minutes, just might not be feasible. So what else you can do? You can slow down the attacker. You can make the 1 hour 32 minutes 2 days, 2 weeks. And then by gaining time, you are slowing down their walk through the OODA loop, and you are gaining time to actually disrupt their kill chain and stop the attack before they reach the objectives. Because the objective of the attacker is usually not, I want to compromise your website, I want to hack your email. No, they want the data, they want to exfiltrate them, they want to manipulate them, they want to steal them, they want to ransomware you out. That's their objective. Everything else is just a tool. So you might be for quite a long time actually compromised, but still having time to stop the attacker from achieving their objectives. And the key to this are the different strategies that you can apply. And I want you to look at this slide from the bottom up, because at the very bottom are the preventive measures. On them, you can build your layered defense. Once you have some defense in place, which is more like passive defense to resist and be able to withstand the attacks, then you can build the defensible environment. And on top of that comes your detection and incident response capabilities. The key to this is that the lower you are, the cheaper it actually is to achieve meaningful improvement in your security. And also it means that if you start from the higher levels without taking proper care of the layers below, not only it's going to be much more expensive, but you are becoming desperate when you are trying to fix holes on the wrong place. So a good example is if you invest, if you come in a company, the company is not protected at all, they want you to build a defense of the company, and they have nothing. Yes, you can start from incident response capabilities because there are some tricks how to do it faster, but essentially it's a temporary compensating measure, the band-aid, for the wrong baseline in the first place. And it's going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to be more about giving hope to survive until you fix the basics. On the other hand, if your defenses are on the preventive measures very strong and very robust, and it can be very simple at the same time, you can laugh off a lot of attacks just straight away. There was interesting research from Scientia Institute this year, if I'm not mistaken, about the ransomware attacks against companies and what had these successful companies in common. What were the success criteria in defense against ransomware attacks? And there was no dark magic. It was multi-factor authentication, network segmentation, and regular and working backups. That's it. 3 very basic things, if done right, significantly decrease the impact of ransomware attacks in real world. So that's your preventive measures. This is what you need to have in place because it stops the whole classes of attacks. Think about the multi-factor authentication, your general antivirus, firewalling, the good old stuff, but it needs to be done right. On top of that, when I speak about layered defense, it's really about not relying on one single tool or technology or setup to protect you. Make sure that if the attacker can compromise something, it's not binary. And that's also very often the mistake I see and hear from practitioners, that they can only operate in binary. Either we are hacked or we are golden. Either we are completely destroyed or nothing bad happened. In reality, it's a bit more so and so. And the layer defense is to give you the breathing room between disaster if you are actually compromised. On top of that, and now we are getting into the interesting stuff, you can actually think about how would you manipulate the battlefield, your environment, that it's not only resilient against the attacks, but that would give you the advantage when responding to the incidents. So I think this is often misunderstood or maybe missing, because people say, okay, we have the network segmented between production and testing and finance systems. What it is that you are saying that we are missing to the defensible environment? The layer defense of like network segmentation is one thing, but the defensible environment is looking at this from the perspective, if we are compromised, can I create choke points on the network that will limit the attackers from spreading? Can I create points in my environment that the attacker would have to go through, and I can install increased logging and detection capabilities there? Can I build a situation where if I detect the attacker, I can deploy either deception techniques or just log something out to gain time? This is actually building your defensible environment. It's preparing for the incident response. And then when you have all of that, then it's the right thing to think about how do we detect and respond to the attackers. I'm guilty. It's my favorite part of the industry as well, but it can go wrong in spending a lot of money on a shiny new toys, while actually you don't have the basics. And then the money you have invested, they are basically force multiplier, which means if you have the basics done, every additional layer is going to multiply the value of the layers below. The same goes, unfortunately, if there are holes. It's going to be more and more expensive to cover at the detection and incident response layer basic measures that are missing on the preventive side of things. So let's go a bit more into detail. What I mean by preventive measures, and this is very, very important for anyone who is working in cybersecurity, maybe less in academia, but in the commercial or like business environment, it's not about you. You might have, and all the credit to you, you might have the best security knowledge, but most of the preventive measures in the companies I have seen and I have worked with or I have consulted for, they are in the IT environment. The security does not start within the security department. So what you can do is accept the fact that it's not about you and help out to get IT to the healthy state. Sometimes it is all about just making sure that they get the support that they deserve. And if I want to pick out one thing on top of the MFA, network segmentation, but more on the strategic and logical thing, is you cannot protect what you don't manage. And there is also this fallacy that I see of crown jewels very often, that some companies say, okay, we control and manage our crown jewels, the most important systems and data of them all, and we don't care about the rest. That's wrong, because the attackers will attack you on your weak side and then find time how to get to your crown jewels anyway. If you don't know your assets and if you don't have the visibility over your assets from 100%, you will never be able to say, I am safe or I have successfully defeated the attackers, because they might be hiding in the shadows. Speaking about shadows, shadow IT, which is usually something that's paid by the business functions of the company and running in parallel, that's disaster waiting to happen for any company that wants to keep their security seriously. So the takeaway here is start working with the IT department first and look into the low-hanging fruit of how do we get to 100% visibility, get things under management, and make sure that we are actually able to exercise our will in the environment. When going into the layered defense, it's mostly about never going all in. You should never say, I have the best EDR on the market, I am safe. And yes, the EDR vendors will tell you that. Similarly, it doesn't make sense to say, oh, I have complete network visibility to the full packet inspection, and yeah, I'm good. I will see everything that's happening. Not at all. Even things like, I don't have anything on the public internet. I have complete hard shell. The only access inside is by VPN. I'm good. These things might be misconfigured. They might be vulnerable. They might fail. So you don't go all in because you just recognize that failures happen. And you need to be prepared for recovery. Concepts of resilience borrowed from ecology are very interesting here because, again, they disrupt the binary thinking of either we are good or we are destroyed. There is something in between. We might be taking hits, but we are able to recover from those hits. One thing that I really think is interesting for academia, and I would love to read more on this, is the topic of monocultures versus heterogeneous environments. Because there are two lines of school. One is we need to have our environment very complex, very structured. Some people even say multiple vendor. Let's get to this later. So it's hard for the attacker to orient there. We will always know the environment better than the attacker because we have the home ground advantage. And that's how we are going to win. The opposite line of thinking says, actually, that's a pipe dream because your heterogeneous environment will be more difficult for you to manage than for the attacker to penetrate. You will never be able to achieve complete visibility and ability to enforce your will on the environment if you have tons of different vendors and your environment is evolving organically throughout the years. That's not security, that's not heterogeneous environment, that's a jungle. And it's going back to the security by obscurity, which, yes, it might give you some advantage over the attacker, but it also brings disadvantages. My strong opinion from like the practical experience, especially in the large enterprise, is this is flawed concept, and monoculture, while making it easier for the attacker, will make it so much easier for you as a defender that it's worth it. And finally, there is the fallacy of the multiple vendor approach that if you have firewalls, you need to have them from at least two different vendors because if one of them is vulnerable, the other is. No, that's not how it works. Because the multiple vendor approach for everything is financially not viable. And you are wasting skills of your people by requiring them to either understand multiple technologies at once at the same good level just because, or worse, failing to the state where some technology on Tuesday might be better managed than other technology on Wednesday based on who is working. I think this belongs to the 90s. But the monocultures versus heterogeneous environments, I would love to see more research on this one. When it comes to the defensible environment, it's really about being able to prepare for the incident. So you want to assume compromise. You want to look into your environment and say, okay, if I see that I'm compromised tomorrow, what is my first action going to be? Is there something I can do that will help me delay the attacker or gain the upper hand? So you assume the compromise and you are preparing for that. And part of the preparation is not only what it is that you will be doing as the security team responding to that, but how can you build those passive defenses in a way that, yes, our HR systems were hacked, but we are able to limit the blast radius and the attackers will not get to the finance systems because we will isolate them in the HR segment. So this is very much preparation for the incident response. And finally, incident response. This is the exciting stuff. This is the stuff that make or break your security in the company. It's going to happen to you one way or the other in your career if you are in security. And it's essentially about fighting the bad guys. And the key here is that you will not be able to implement some miraculous technology or network segmentation during the incident. Most likely not. You will be working with what you have, and it will be about execution. Remember the 1 hour 32 minutes from the beginning. That's your clock you are running against. So you need to be able to just say, okay, this is happening. This is the phase of the kill chain where we identified it. This is what we are going to do next. We are going to delay the attacker. We are going to contain the damage. We are going to find the root cause, get them out, plug the holes, and then we move to the lessons learned and recover. That's what you want to do. And in the incident response, communication and coordination is key. Don't underestimate project managers during major incident response. And don't underestimate the comms team. These should be your best friends on top of legal, because if the incident goes really wrong, legal is your next best friend. And finally, again, don't start building your security from the top, from the incident response. There are situations where it is viable because you can gain meaningful improvements if you just throw a lot of money in some managed incident response services, and there are quite a good ones on the market that will get you through the tough time. But still, this is not solving the primary problem you might have in the baseline. The takeaway also is it's very possible to win because you don't have to be the best. Still go back to the OODA loop and the kill chains. You just need to be better than the adversary. And the sad reality is you might just need to be better than the company or the organization next to you. Because the adversaries are very often also going for the weak targets. They are pursuing their return of investment. They are looking into efficient use of their time. So if you prove yourself to be tough case to crack, they might just move on and give up. It's happening. So the objective of this lesson or presentation is not to instill fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but rather give you the idea that it is possible to win, but you need to start with strategic mindset and not from the tactical execution only. That's what comes after. And finally, I have spoken about the layered approach to this. I have spoken about some technologies and some principles, even some organizational measures, but I have missed the secret sauce. So what is missing? What is the most important in the end? It's people. It's the hearts and minds and people in your security team, around you, in IT, in the whole organization. And the problem of that is, why is that? because our information technology industry is fundamentally immature and flawed. Just imagine if you would consider bridge builders or construction workers or companies that would build a house or a bridge and then say, yeah, every other month we need to come and fix it because otherwise it's going to break. And if it breaks, they say, oh, sorry, we messed up. Maybe in a month, we might get back to it. That's the situation of the technology industry. And until this is fixed on the engineering level, where we can go from let's code something, hope it works, and if there are errors, bugs, and vulnerabilities, we will fix them as they go, and everyone will say it is okay because this is the state of the industry. Until we move from there, the security will be important and will be about people. Because in the end, we are playing the catch up as the defenders. We are the reactive, even when in reaction, we are trying to prepare the battlefield. But we are necessary because the information technology industry is immature as it is. Maybe in 20, 30 years, things will be different. And IT will be just another engineering profession where it's expected that there are no defects. Or if there are defects, there are sub 1% over the year. And the reason why I'm enforcing the people so much is there is no magic black box, but everyone wants to sell you one. You go to any conference where there is industrial presence, and you will hear our solution is going to fix, and then you can just select your disaster recovery. We will catch all hackers. I receive those about twice per week. That's not going to happen. That's a snake oil. You can always do more results with a good team and average technology that you put to a good use and that you 100% know, have visibility, control, and work strategically towards a good security, than throwing money on the problem and trying to buy solutions every other month. Because what's happened then is there are tons of organizations that have 10, 15 different security products bought and paid for on annual basis, and none of them is actually implemented above 50% of maturity, and they are sometimes clashing with each other and just not providing the value. And the answer to that is not, let's buy 16th. The answer is, let's get the right people in. Thanks. And I'm looking for your questions.
Hey, thank you, Pete, for a great talk. And I think you well said it. I think a good team is more important than throwing money at the solution. So I think that's a very powerful statement, yet it's exactly correct statement. So on that question, how do you define the characteristics of a good team in a cybersecurity? What is your intake of you managing a big team there, and we are looking at the next generation students, what type of piece of advice, and also what do you see as a characteristics of a good team may look like?
So I will start from really this key sentence. I'm looking at a team. I'm not looking for brilliant superstars. I think there was in our industry a time, again, maybe 5-10 years ago, when there was this belief, supported by movies and so on, that if you have the right superstar on the team, they will come and save the day. And because of that, there was a lot of superstars on the teams who were intolerable human beings, who were toxic to work with. No one wanted to work with them. And in the end, the companies that cultivated this approach that it's okay that you are a horrible person if you are technically excellent, ended up with dysfunctional teams, because no one wants to work with these people on the long term, and security is a long-term game. It's a continuous process. We all know that. And if you are working with people who are just unpleasant to work with or toxic or anything like that, you have the opportunities to move away and go somewhere else where there are decent human beings. So what I look for when I'm putting together teams, and it's actually something that I think I'm good at, I'm much more in building and changing things than like maintaining things. I'm always looking into technical competency, but more of a baseline. For a role or for like parts of the team, I know what is the baseline. I cannot go below, but that's teachable. You can teach skills. But if someone comes out as really toxic personality, they must be managed out and left for someone else who still believes in toxic superstars being the solution. To me, they are not solution, they are the problem.
Good, thank you. We have some questions from people here too.
Thank you for your presentation, Peter. One of the questions I have, and maybe I'm representing the younger audience as well, those who are new to the field of cybersecurity. What are the skills we can learn, pick up early on in order to become technically competent as we go into the workforce?
That's an excellent question, and it's something that I devote quite a lot of my time to. I would say focus on the basic IT skills first. When I'm interviewing or my team is interviewing someone for the junior positions, even for the junior positions, I want to know, do you know anything about networking? Do you know anything about how computers work? I'm not interested actually in math and in algorithms and in programming structures. That's for software developers. When I'm looking for security professionals, my first question on interviews always is, do you know what's the difference between public and private IP and why it matters? You would not believe how large percentage of even senior people fail on this question. And if they fail, I ask another one. If you see HTTPS, this green log in your browser, what does this actually tell you about the website? And how does this work and why it is important? On these two questions, I unfortunately rule out about 60 to 70% of people who apply to my positions and not just junior ones. And I'm not looking always for like brilliant deep down answer on asymmetric cryptography, but if you tell me that there is no difference or that private IPs are behind firewalls or public IPs are just for governments, like, I'm sorry, we are not on the baseline. So I'm always looking for the baseline. And I think that almost in any part of cybersecurity, unless you go heavy into policies and privacy elements, maybe risk management, you will need these like basic things. Try to set up virtual machines on your computer, multiple of them, network them together, debug some real problems. That's going to move you forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. I think we're looking at one more question. So do you have any other questions that's coming up? And one other question I have is, how do you see automation plays a role in different buckets of threat identification, management, and maybe recovery process? Do you see to what extent automation is good and AI is actually playing a role? Or how do you see the human intervention? Where do you think there is this human intervention actually draws a line?
So I think automation is absolutely fundamental, but because just like the sheer volume of data that we need to go through as a security practitioners, you just cannot do it manually. There needs to be a way of automation. However, I am skeptical in an automation that would resolve 100% of certain problem. I see automation as augmenting or enhancing the human capabilities. So when I'm looking at this from the perspective of security analysts, like threat detection, as you mentioned, I expect the automation to filter out the noise from the incidents that I actually need to look into as a human being. I do not expect automation to solve all of them, because the ratio of true to false positive is always going to be there, but I expect automation to help me, to make my work meaningful.
We have one more question from the audience. Travis asking, what are your preference for security, IPv6 or IPv4? That's probably, what is your take?
Oh, that's a surprisingly controversial question. So IPv6 is dead. Like, it's a protocol that was born dead. It was poorly designed for adoption, and it's just not being used. Yes, you can see some like IPv6 networks. Some companies have like dual networks on IPv6 or IPv4, but unfortunately, the IPv6, I think, missed its window of opportunity, and it's just not practical. It's just nowhere seen as like the primary network. My one exception might be actually IoT and the cars and the like things that are being built on the green field. That's not really my space. But when you look into companies, organizations, enterprises, it's IPv4 and IPv6 is a funny flex sometimes, and that's it.
Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate it. And with this, we'll conclude this talk. And thank you, Peter, for your time. And we'll be sending you your nice plaque and for your contribution as a distinguished speaker. And again, thank you so much.